Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Check Out This Record podcast. My name is Frank, and with me is my good buddy, Mark.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back for episode 24.
That's right, episode 24. This is the podcast where we recommend albums for each other to review. We also have a wide variety of musical discussions, so be sure to check out our Instagram page, our YouTube channel for additional content that will leave you wanting more of this musical goodness. And of course, our random nonsense is on there as well. On YouTube, you could see our awesome jawlines now, and we welcome comments. And if you want to have us check out a record, just let us know. And while you're at it, please subscribe to the channel, give us a review, rate us, let us know what you think, say all those good comments below. So I say this right now, Mark, how are you, my man?
I'm doing well, Frank. I'm really excited for tonight's episode. We've got a feature for an amazing band.
Absolutely. We have another spotlight episode for you. And Mark and I feel that we need to do this band justice and dive right into it. So we're highlighting one of the most personal, hardworking, ethical, they were politically active bands of all time. And that band is none other than Washington, D.C.'s own Fugazi.
Now, we're going to talk about them in the past tense since they haven't been active since 2001. But to cover our asses, they haven't formally disbanded. Just put down the tweet. We're not starting any rumors. It's just easier to talk about them in the past tense, okay?
Yeah.
Besides, I mean, they've got 6 studio albums, 4 EPs, a comp album, a DIY documentary with an accompanying soundtrack. I mean, they've done a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will be our first of 2 episodes here. So as Mark mentioned, there's a ton of work to digest, and we want to do it justice, and there's a lot of justice to be had. For instance, and rather amazingly, for as long as they've been a band, with the exception of the first gig, which was well before anything that was recorded, here is Fugazi's lineup. It's Ian Mackaye on guitar and vocals. It's Guy Picciotto on guitar and vocals, Joe Lally on bass, and Brandon Canty on drums. So let's begin at the beginning. And I feel that before we get right into Fugazi, we need to chat about a few bands first. And we're going to start with Minor Threat.
Yeah, so chances are Frank and I aren't going to tell you anything you don't know about Minor Threat. But for posterity, I got the word right, they were formed in Washington, D.C. in 1980 and broke up in 1983. Depending on how you do the math, they were a band for 3 or 4 years. Everywhere you look on the internet, somebody's got a different opinion, so whatever. The band's legacy carries on to this day thanks to their raw and powerful sound. Songs that drove to the heart of what hardcore punk rock, my cat just bit me, hardcore punk rock in the 80s, especially in the DC area, was meant to be. And their DIY approach to everything was definitely a big linchpin in drawing people to them. But that, of course, will tie into Fugazi years to come and will be a big part. Amazingly, Minor Threat would only release 2 EPs and 1 LP, a surprisingly small body of work for a band that gets as much credit as it does. And all of that credit is very well earned. The band would eventually break up as a result of conflicts within the band as to what direction they should take, spawning many legendary DC bands, in addition to Fugazi, most notably Dag Nasty. Of course, I can't mention Minor Threat without mentioning Discord Records and the Discord House, a home that Ian Mackaye and his business partner bought to run Discord Records. The DIY approach really took hold there and really kept the DC scene apart. Frank's now going to tell us about Rites of Springs, while I try not to get bit again.
Yeah, hopefully Mark's okay after his cat bit him. But now we're going to move on to Rites of Spring. So from 84 to 86, this features future Fugazi members, Guy Picciotto and Brandon Canty. They had energy and extreme passion, and they were experimental. So without going so far down the rabbit hole of musical genres, their songs tackled personal issues, which was a drastic change from the scene norms, and the band was therefore dubbed emotional hardcore or emo core. And as you could imagine, imagine. Then after that, they got labeled with being the first emo band. Now, this is something the band rejected. They only played 15 shows, which is pretty remarkable in the DC area. And you can search for those shows on YouTube, and they're a cool sight to see. And there's an album and some demos available as well if you would like to listen to them in all the usual places that you do. So we have Minor Threat, we have Rites of Spring, Band's End, right? Kai wants to start a new band, and the name Fugazi, which is generally known as a slang term for fake. We've seen it in movies before, but actually that's not where the origins of that term came from. So Mark, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Frank, the word Fugazi, Mackaye found in a book about Vietnam, aptly titled NAM, and it's an acronym for the following: fucked up, got ambushed, zipped in to a body bag. Fugazi, 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 which to the unexpected could describe their music to a new listener. If you weren't ready for this and somebody threw on some deep stuff, you could really get a little Fugazi.
Yeah, such a good point, because it was a challenge because they really didn't follow any certain style of music. Yes, the band embraced hardcore, but was far from its limitations and its trappings. They explored art rock, experimental rock, post-punk, reggae, dub, and a local DC sound that combined funk and groove sounds together called go-go. Fugazi sound, they had irregular song structures. There's heavy riffs, steady beats. They'd love to start and stop on a dime and keep the audience and the band itself on its toes. To me, they're one of those bands that are really super difficult to label. So we'll just do our best to describe it, and hopefully it'll make sense. What was also cool is the dueling guitars. You had Mackaye and Pachado, and they were the perfect yin and yang musically to each other. Mackaye on guitar was playing these lower, chunkier sounding riffs, and Pachado was playing these higher notes. So there was a contrast there, and what was even more impressive is that Pachado saw this and intentionally used a single coil guitar, which has a lighter sound and a higher sound, to complement Mackaye's humbucker sound guitar, which generally has a lower, heavier type sound. I mean, Mark, this whole interlocking of music, it's pretty beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is, Frank. You know, we talk about balance when it comes to music, and Fugazi embodies that in a really unique way. My cat is not happy we're doing this.
No, it doesn't
it's
like
his
you
problem. We're going to keep going. Take a look at what the rhythm section of Joey Lally on bass and Brandon Cantry on drums are able to do while the guitars wail and moan in different directions. They glue it together with heavy, intensive grooves and bass lines that occasionally carry the melody as needed, allowing Mackaye and Pachado to express themselves both with their guitars lyrically and vocally.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I spoke briefly about the guitars, but you mentioned vocals, so let's move on to that. So vocally, the two played off of each other very well. Mackaye was more direct and Pachado was more abstract, all while managing to come together beautifully for unexpected harmonies. They were masters of the less is more theory, and when it suited a song, while still be able to create this whole fully immersive, rich texture, and just blast you with feedback, crushing drums, and take your breath away, and really leave you wanting more of their next sonic expression. Their live shows, as you could imagine, captured this energy. However, Mackaye was adamant about no slam dancing or crowd surfing, as it got out of hand in the hardcore scene, and he would later call out people, often stopping shows until things settled down. The band reflected in an interview that someone is paralyzed because of crowd surfing at one of their shows, and they would never let that happen to a fan. The violence surrounding the hardcore scene had become ritualized, and people went to shows really with that intent in mind, to participate in that violence. And that was important for the band to not have that be a part of their live shows and the live experience. And some might have viewed Fugazi as turning on the scene that built them, but the band saw it as responsibility to their fans and their stand on anti-violence morals. And me and Mark have been to several shows before, and I could only say that the experience is 10 times better when none of that is going on. And if I were the front man of a band, I would also want that not to be at my shows. So,
Morals reminds me, Frank. Tell us about that awesome Fugazi T-shirt you have.
Oh yeah. Wait. Trick question there, Mark. You old scallywag. I knew exactly what you were doing. So here we go. Fugazi infamously never sold merch. Never sold it. Never sold it. The band looked at selling merchandise as a trapping of mainstream music, as of the mainstream music industry, and additionally something that would need a this person would need to have a full-time job, right? They would be on the road with them. They would need lodging, food, and they would need a pay person. So their solution: don't sell the merchandise. Don't sell at the shows. One of the band's most important ideas was admission to see them should really be capped at $5 a ticket. Unfortunately, they tended to hover around $10 to $15, but the band set a precedent that seeing them live was an affordable experience. Not to mention, it kept the cost and the price of albums pretty low. And that's to say, this is CDs now we're talking about, right? Because we're talking about the 90s here, and vinyl really didn't make its comeback yet. So they were set at $8 to $10, which, I mean, in the 90s, the CDs were super, super expensive. So by keeping their album sales to record sales and record stores and to mail order through Discord Records, the band was able to tour more freely without limiting access to their music, which was pretty remarkable, Mark.
Discord is really special in the way they operate as a record company, right? They operate literally just above cost to keep expenses to a minimum. So the music's affordable for their listeners, that people can still have access to it. This was a big part of that DIY ethos, by using a network of friends for everything from recording. If you look through most of the Discord discography, they're all recorded pretty much the same place. To pressing the records, to creating the art for the records and packaging them. It's all done through a network of friends so that they can keep that cost low, keep their friends making some money. While the rest of the music industry was looking at profits, they were looking at supporting their friends and building a true music scene that way. It was really refreshing for the time.
Yeah, totally, and they've they've done well. Now, listen, I have a business, and one thing that we try to do is to keep things simple, and it starts with low overhead. We bust our humps, and we keep the costs down, so the profits are healthy. This is smart, just in a business realm. I mean, this is the things they teach you about being efficient, having a plan, and having long-term sustainability. And it's smart in a realm and genre where we might not see it. So they were definitely trailblazers in reference to that, especially in the late 80s. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's really remarkable, Mark.
yeah. You want to start with the first
Yeah.
record?
Yeah, I think it's time we get to the records. So chronologically, and I say that because the first record we're going to talk about is not really their first record, but we're going to start with 13 songs. It was released in September of 1989. It's not their first record, right? But it's the first release, again, chronologically. It's a comp of the band's first two EPs, Fugazi and Margin Walker. It's the most successful release, selling over 3 million. Arguably their most popular, as it features their most popular song in Waiting Room. And it's side note, Mark, this annoys me, but Eddie Vedder named it one of his all-time favorite records.
Even a broken clock's right twice a day. I don't know. Hey, look, I mean, he says he likes everything. He's bound to say he likes something that we like.
Of course. He ruined
Whatever.
my
At
day.
least it's not Bono.
Yes, exactly.
Like many of you, this was my introduction to Fugazi. I remember being blown away by how powerful it was musically and lyrically. I can't tell you how many bass players have let me butcher the intro of Waiting Room while frantically refusing to cover it. Having been a drummer, just that bass and drum intro, and it's a lot trickier than it looks, and that song's a lot more than it lets on the surface, which is what's really cool about Fugazi in general, is that there's so much underneath the surface. Anyways, I remember discovering that this was actually two EPs compiled together, as Frank mentioned, and started listening to them as such. Mackaye and Quito, I hope I'm saying that right. I feel bad if I'm saying it wrong.
Pachado.
Okay. Take turns on vocals, but we only have Mackaye on guitar for the first 7 songs, for the first EP.
Right.
The rhythm section more than makes up for the single guitar, with the clear bass lines that carry that 7-song EP into its legendary status. And it should be. That thing's nonstop bonkers good from beginning to end. If I look like I'm doing something weird, my cat's really giving me dirty looks and wants to bite me again. So I'm just trying to avoid that. The following 6 tracks, also known as the Margin Walker EP, were treated to the second guitar with, oh, thank God he ran away, with Pachado, and the core sound was really born. You get to see that infancy of what will later grow and be really solid. The backing choruses are rich and fuller. Fugazi's depth of tone and expression begin to become exposed, and they're really just as hypnotic as they ever get right out of the gate. They're really fantastic. My favorite tracks from this record, because there's just so much to cover.
So good.
From the first half, Blue Man, Badmouth, Bulldog Front, absolutely love. Look, I could just name all 13 songs from this fucking thing, and I wouldn't be wrong. From Margin Walker, the title track, one of my favorites is Burning 2, and then Promises. Promises is just phenomenal.
Yeah. It's so good. And real quick, it reminded me when you said Pachado or Pachotto. I mean, listen, I'm Italian. These Italian names have a lot of vowels, right? So Pachado, Pachotto,
There's a lot of letters, period, in this guy.
A lot of letters, yeah.
This Guy's name.
There you go, Guise, yeah. But you mentioned how he wasn't really playing guitar in that first EP. So he saw like the Flavor Flav character of and what he was doing pretty much, right? And said he wanted kind of to be that, but really it was his attempt to get into the band and then start playing guitar. So that's why you'll see some live shows and him not playing guitar. But when he comes and play guitar, as you say, it starts to go ahead and really, really take form. And it's such a great album. So listen, the accolades that this album has received, it's not only justified and it's so impressive, and it's not even the band's first proper album. It's crazy. So to have this buzz from a compilation of EPs really speaks volume to the material here. It's the most straightforward punk sounding of their records. Tracks like Waiting Room, Bulldog Front, Give Me the Cure, Margin Walker, they're upfront, they're confrontational, and they're basic nature and structure. Even though this is the band's most popular and well-known release, I, though, have a hard time saying that it's their best work. And the context to this and the caveat is that I know what's coming up and how there's extreme growth and just superb musicianship. It's not like we get a radical shift and the songs just drain into the gutter of crap or anything like that. So I totally and 1,000% get this album's importance. It's nearly flawless and I love it. The music to me is timeless, and this is 89. So that word alternative rock, it was in the air with the Replacements and REM, but this record and the sound, it also encompassed that. My favorite tracks, Bulldog Front, Margin Walker, Give Me the Cure. I can name all 13, but those are the top. So let's go to the next record, Mark, and let's say it in unison. One, two, three. Repeater. There you go.
Terrible. That was almost worse than our rapping.
That was. I did like the rapping though.
Yeah, you did. We
got
really
slack from it. I'm not gonna lie. But,
that's all right. Fuck them.
Yeah. I don't care. I'll do it again.
So, Repeater, released April 19th, 1990. That was my little sister Terry's 7th birthday.
Oh.
Yeah.
I know Terry.
The band's first full album. The band took the approach of jamming and writing new material as opposed to just playing what Ian Mackaye had brought to the studio. So they really were able to develop their sound through it. Title is actually an obscure nod to the Beatles' Revolver. It's pretty cool. Yeah. I'm not sure on the video where it's going to show up, but to me, he's right there. And it sold over 1 million copies in the U.S. and 2 million worldwide. I mean, that's pretty substantial. That's a lot of people listening to Fugazi. Frank, why don't you give us the first review on this one?
Well, okay, so what's interesting here, we have this alternative rock sound that predates Nirvana's Nevermind, which also makes me want to put on my alternate reality cap and be like, what if, right? What if Fugazi received the acclaim and perhaps the boost that Nirvana was supposed to have? Now, knowing their ethos, I'm sure not sure how that would work out, and they're an independent entity. But Mark, I mean, based on sound alone, it's something to think about, right?
You know, it reminds me, and we'll talk about the documentary in episode 2, but there's a moment in the film where Ian Mackaye says the president of Atlantic came to them at a show and kind of alluded to making them a deal, like, you know, why don't we set up a meeting to do a thing? But nothing ever came of it, because probably Mackaye is pretty forward about it. He didn't think it was a genuine offer. Or who knows, maybe he didn't, he just didn't give a shit, in which case, more props to him. But it is interesting to think about what would mainstream music have been if we got Fugazi getting the credit that Nirvana got, or the, you know, the influence and say. But at the same time, would Fugazi have sounded like Fugazi, or would it have sounded like something else on that corporate,
Yeah.
you know, on that major label where, you know, there's different pressures and different things are important. You know, for me, I think we're lucky the way it played out.
Yeah,
Back to you,
absolutely.
Frank.
Got it. Okay, so here we go. Repeater. This album, I love this album so much. It's flawless. I mean, the first 5 tracks, you get such staples: Turnover, Repeater, Merchandise, Blueprint. Merchandise strikes a chord, considering the band had no merchandise. And as we stated before, and the "We owe you nothing, you have no control." I mean, that's their mantra, really, in a nutshell. And I'm sure this presented a prevalent vibe during their soon-to-be courted time by the major labels, which would eventually happen. The lyrical content is super heavy, but to me, it's never exhausting. The music, it's that mature rock sound I always talk about, and that creates really this timeless sound. The musicality, you have the melodic nature of these simple yet tastefully done riffs that create such a well-crafted sound. Take the intro to Blueprint. I love that sound. There's these inverse chords there that are just done so well. And to me personally, I always like that. So whenever I pick up a guitar, I always not try to mimic that per se, but I always kind of use those inverse and melodic chords. Obviously, there's deep personal undertones, which are in all Fugazi albums. And this could translate to listeners on the political, but I take it as more personal, addressing what they experience in many facets, including the stuff around the DC area that they have seen. It's not done in a preachy way at all. And you can't help but just be tentative by the way they're singing it. And it's just an amazing record. Favorite tracks: Turnover, Repeater, Merchandise, Blueprint, Styrofoam. Again, you know, I can name the whole record, but that's my thoughts. So Mark, talk about Repeater, man.
Yeah, after each album, we're both going to say, I could just name every song.
Yeah, I think we're gonna say that. Yeah.
So for me, Repeater picks up right where 13 songs ends. I mean, and pretty smoothly to transition. Yet feels more polished, even in the rawness of it, because there is some intentional distortion. There is some feedback, some things that sound unpolished, yet the way Fugazi is able to present them, they sound more developed than they had previously. It's really interesting. The band has found a way to mature sonically as the lyrics build. Ever more personal and poignant. Repeater addresses self-hatred with songs like, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Sive-Fisted Find.
I wondered how to properly say that too, so I'm glad you're saying that, not me.
Folks, I'm dyslexic, so the fact that I got that many letters out is amazing. The ever greasier world of corporate rock with merchandise and presumably greed, although big amounts of manic gang vocals through greed could have its meaning be about anything, whether it's corporate rock radio or whether it's you know, just working a day job, whether it's being a working stiff. They really leave an air of letting you figure out what the song means. And that's what's so cool. When I say, like, oh, you know, these songs are so political, and Frank says, oh, these songs are so personal, they do a great job of leaving it up to the listener to decide what's the song about. And that's really present on Repeater. It's really pretty cool.
Yeah, love it.
Pachado has a particularly superb performance on Two Beats Off.
Yeah.
Seemingly singing from a point of consciousness, like as though we were doing like beat poetry, while managing to pull the listener in as the bass line and drums hypnotize you with like a smooth, steady groove. As far as the +3 tracks, because I think it's important to mention those,
Yes.
EP released just before the album. None of the songs from the EP were on the album. We're talking about song number 1, Joe number 1, Break In. Originally released ahead of the album, as I said. They're all amazing. Song number 1 is not a fuck you song. I'll save that thought for later on. I fucking love that lyric, dude. That lyric is so good. So my favorite songs, the whole fucking thing. Headphones, coffee,
Yep.
bury yourself in the fucking lyric.
Yeah. So good. Love it. Love it. Absolutely. So next we're going to move on, Mark, to a steady diet of nothing. And this was released July 91. So this is a quote by the late stand-up comedian Bill Hicks, Steady Diet of Nothing. It's the band's first self-produced release, right? Pachado said it took a toll on the band due to the immense amount of touring and the fact that they didn't know what they were doing technically. So really hands-on experience, on-the-job training, all that stuff.
But I think what you're saying, and I threw a question mark on
yes
because I wasn't sure. This is the first one they did alone, because on all the albums they're credited as producers, but this is just them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Just them alone. Just them alone. Not the additional.
We took turns doing research.
Yes, we did. Yes. So Mackaye said it resulted in many things being tuned down, creating a more reserved and conservative sound sonically. But Mark, I started us off with repeaters. So why don't you start us off with Steady Diet of Nothing?
Yeah, you know, Fugazi never really hid that they weren't happy with the sound of this record. Personally, I love it. I think they may have accidentally made a lo-fi record, but I think it worked to their advantage as it kind of forced them to be more creative and push their sound in a bold new direction. Frank makes a great point. The rhythm section on this record is perfect. He might say that in the future. I'm not really sure. To the point, I'd go as far as to say Brendan Cantney is a human drum machine. His timing, it's literally perfect. Listen to his work on Stax. If you don't believe me. Stax has this, you know, we talk about using the silence and less is more, and there's this steady drum beat through it with occasional lyrics, and he holds it together by himself. It almost feels disjarring. It's so even and so smoothly tempoed.
Yeah.
It's really fantastic. This is Fugazi showcasing their ability to deliver heartfelt and personal music in less than perfect fashion. I mean, it really does take that lo-fi sound. See, this is when we did that record where you're like, it's lo-fi, I love it. This is where I think it works. I'm sorry. This is why I think it works when you don't mean to do it, when you're not forcing it, when you're instead of aspiring to it, you're trying to work against it. You know, you pull off something as amazing as Steady Diet of Nothing. My favorite tracks, Frank's gonna say all of them, but I'm gonna add Nice New Outfit, Polish. And I love the instrumental track on this. Steady Diet is phenomenal. There's almost always an instrumental track. It's one of those things with Fugazi that gets a little confusing because there are these bridges that musical bridges that tend to go on or flow in one direction and then cut back the other. So it can be kind of tricky at the end of a song if they go into an instrumental. You can get a little lost. But if you're there, if you're in with it, they're really beautiful. They do a great job of traversing records using instrumentals and setting up that flow. So I'm going to shut up and let Frank tell you what he thought about it.
Yeah, the instrumentals, they're so welcome too. It's not like, oh, here's an instrumental track and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's a showcase of musicianship, and I love them. So I remember, Mark, you burned this for me many, many years ago. And what instantly captured my attention was the sane and detailed approach to the focus of the rhythm section, which you knew I was going to say because you could predict the future, right?
Yeah.
It's evident in the first song, Exit Only. This may be one of my favorite openings to an album ever. I mean, I love the overall feel of this song, the groove. Guy just repeating Exiton, and it builds and it builds and it builds and then it erupts. Everything is in sync here. I do hear a difference sonically from Repeater, and this could be when that transition is starting to happen in that bridge to, the band being more hardcore, and coming from the post-hardcore scene. Reclamation is another that just starts with this fierce E octave chord and then slows it down with this groove. Again, that's a sound like Cobain was influenced by, right? When he heard the Pixies that slow down and then build up to a really high aggression sound. Stax, another great tune. It grows on me. And Latin
That song's
Roots.
fucking awesome.
What about Latin Roots, Mark?
I fucking love that.
Another prime example of just a well-written rock song. Hey, Long Division, it's another standout tune, and it's almost really an indie rock tune in its nature. You get super bare, but again, that rhythm section is being highlighted, and you get these great lyrics, great vocals. From Mackaye on that song, and here's the growth that will really continue to carry them throughout their future records. So favorite tracks, although Mark said I was going to say all of them, if I had to pick standouts, Exit Only, Stax, Latin Roots, Long Division. But what I'm really trying to say is the whole album. So
yeah, listen to the whole fucking album.
Yeah. So Mark, we go on to the fourth and the final record of part one, but take us away.
So In on the Kill Taker, June 30th, 1993. Due to the popularity of alternative rock, it was the band's first album to debut on the Billboard charts. Good job, Fugazi.
Crazy.
It showcased the band's aggressive style while expanding on their sound. For the album tour, Lollapalooza tried to recruit the band for a headlining spot, but they were turned down because the tickets were not $5, $33 in 1993. That's, I'm not gonna lie to you, pretty good.
Yeah. I would say so. I would have to say this: out of the first four records, I probably up until now gave this one, I would say, the least amount of spins from the first four, and I'm not sure why. It's just one of those things that just occurred. I always clumped this in to Steady Diet, and I thought that they were more similar. Maybe the color of the colors, aesthetically, with Steady having kind of this brown and yellow tone, and on the Kill Taker having a yellow cover. I guess I just subconsciously mashed them together. However, after lots of listening, this album, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, my man. It's aggressive, but those more aggressive songs show growth. And when you get those toned down, meaningful tunes that they just expand on their sounds. Rend It strikes so much emotion where you have Guy yelling, "Why don't you come to my house? Why don't you drag me right out?" I probably listened to that song, no lie, about 20 times today. I love it. You feel it right there. You get just a song. You get a song over 6 minutes with 23 beats off. It's almost as if they took the concept of a background drone sound and just created a rad song out of it. Casavets features really this 90s alt rock vibe, and if there was a song that would sum up Fugazi, it may as well be what the documentary was named after, Instrument, right? I really love everything about this album. The sound is more robust, it is, than Steady Diet. It wasn't just the band producing it, so they went back, obviously, to the lineup that they had before. It's one of those I'm really glad I revisited because I think it's a hidden gem. Favorite tracks: Rend It, Walk-In Syndrome, Returning the Screw, Casavets. I love this record, Mark.
I believe it's Cassavetti.
Cassavetti, is that what it is?
Named after the director.
Yes. There we go.
This record is fucking insane. Fucking insane. It feels personal. It feels inherently political. It almost feels like a reaction to DC itself and the chaos of politics and the city's unique suburban emptiness, as if aliens are trying to signal you, but Fugazi got in the fucking way. It opens with Facet Squared.
So good.
It's a song about how flags are fucking stupid, and how what they stand for isn't what they mean, and how we're misusing it. It's fucking awesome. But I mean, you get songs like Facet Squared, Smallpox Champion, Great Comp, and 23 Beats Off. And they'll each have you raising a banner for something different, right? Even though Great Cops is telling your friend he's a piece of shit, which is really kind of, I hadn't thought about that, and then I was doing some reading, and somebody was like, he's telling somebody they'd make a great cop. And in punk rock, we hate cops, which is unfortunately a cliche that's really, I would hope, has gone away. But to say like, hey, you'd be a great cop would mean like, hey, fuck you, you're not really that punk. But I don't think Fugazi is that punk, although I guess you couldn't deny that Ian Mackaye is inherently punk. It'd be really, I guess he would have to sell out.
Yeah.
I went on a little bit of a tangent there. Thank you. There are
I love it. I love it.
Tracks like Returning the Screw, like Frank mentioned, Rend It, and The Last Chance for a Slow Dance. Will have you looking inward on the choices you're making and the choices that are being made for you.
Yeah.
The album is recklessly cathartic, yet insanely well balanced.
Yeah.
Favorite tracks, listen to all the ones I just named, but what I want you to do is start the CD at 1 and then just finish at the end.
There you go.
Because this fucking record's insane, dude. This is obviously, look, I'm gonna let Frank tell you what we're gonna get into next week. But what I'm trying to get at, and like, Fugazi did this to me. I was really well thought and well spoken earlier. Listened to a bunch of Fugazi, and now I'm all fucked up. Got ambushed, and then I got zipped in. Look, these records make you think, and it's really interesting because you start at something small, like the self-titled 7-song EP, right? And Waiting Room and Bulldog Front, and you take this really like this small idea of punk rock and hardcore and pushing it beyond whatever that bullshit's supposed to mean, right? And you wrap it in emotion, and you just keep rolling it up and rolling it up and rolling it up until it grows into an insane record, like In on the Kill Taker. I mean, it's really crazy, when you, and I really do encourage people, like when Frank and I do this, we sit down, headphones on, we find the best version of the lyrics we can find, we listen to the music, we go through it, we do our research. Sit down with these records. Do it in order. Don't do it in order. Just don't do it in one sitting. You will go crazy.
Yeah.
Get into these records. Fugazi really finds a way to push emotion beyond personal, beyond political, beyond the whole thing. It's really phenomenal.
Yeah. I know, and listen, if it looks like we're exhausted, we are, because we listened to Fugazi albums for the past week. It's heavy content, right? It really is heavy content, and you could really interpret these things in many different ways. There's the personal, the political side. Mark knows me for so many years. Mark knows I don't like any of the political stuff. I am not what you would deem a leftist or anything of that nature at all. I am just Frank. That's it. I'm an individual. I took these songs so personal because they were talking about what they were experiencing, right? And my point in saying all this is that this is for all listeners. This is not just for a segment of a certain group of people. Fugazi is really for so many different musical lovers out there and musical fans. And I think everyone should give them a listen and do it the way Mark said. And if you're exhausted after it, you could blame us because you're going to be exhausted.
You're going to be exhausted.
So should we talk about part 2, Mark? I know.
There's not that much left, guys. We could probably do it now, but I mean, there's 3 more albums, which are like amazing. A couple more EPs, a documentary, the soundtrack to that documentary. And we haven't talked about that the band recorded like 90% of all the live performances they've ever done.
Yeah.
And they're on the internet for like $2 or $3 per concert, and you can see Fugazi pick your birthday and a year. Fugazi probably played it, and you can see that concert for nothing.
So
cool. It's really insane. I mean, we just got a little bit to go.
Yeah, yeah, but we had to do two parts, and we'll be looking at Red Medicine, End Hits, talk about the documentary instrument and the argument. We'll wrap a nice bow around it, Mark, with our own personal ranking of the albums, and who knows, maybe you're doing a top 10 favorite Fugazi songs, which will probably be tough to do, but who knows? We'll throw at you,
Yeah,
right,
it's
Mark?
not
So
that much. It's not
not
that
that
much.
not that much. So listen, everyone, we hope you've enjoyed part one of such a great band. And of course, if you have recommendations, send them our way. Please let us know. Again, I really hope everyone enjoyed listening to this. Stay tuned for part two of Fugazi. And thank you, everyone, and be safe.
Go listen to Rites of Springs and then all of Fugazi. Bye bye.